There are some tried and true rules of composition that really work in photography. There are some photographers who are of the opinion that these rules are somewhat below them and they don't want to use them because they have the eye on their own. Well, it may be that you as a photographer have the most creative eye in the world and you can somehow magically find amazing compositions. But what if there is kind of a set of steps and rules that you can use so that you have something to actually look for when you're out in the field? Because finding a beautiful composition just magically on your own is so difficult to do. And I personally know the feeling of what it's like to be walking around aimlessly with my camera in my hand and not being able to find anything that's jumping out at me and saying, photograph me, photograph me. And it can be actually kind of depressing when you've put in a lot of time and effort to go to a great photography location and you're not happy with the photos that you're getting. So if you have some rules that you can use as a basis to help you hunt down a good composition, it's going to be of great benefit to you. Let's talk about the 6 rules of composition that you can use when you're out in the field taking landscape photos and how you can use them to find a new and original composition. So the first one is a rule that I don't actually use to help look for a photo. More, I use this one for I've already found a composition and how should I just adjust the last minute little tweak. And this is one that everybody has heard of before, and it is the rule of thirds. And so again, I don't use the rule of thirds as an aid to help me find something to photograph. I more use it as an aid just to make that final little tweak within the frame. So what is the rule of thirds? So if this is your viewfinder, and then if you were to have an imaginary line on the third, so here's the left third like that, there's the right third, here's the top third, and here's the bottom third. And so with the rule of thirds, you want to put your interesting aspects of the photo on a third line. So if there's something important, some kind of a main subject, you may want to put it like this. Or if there's a main subject that is a lot smaller, you may want to have it where 2 third lines intersect. Maybe there, maybe there, maybe here, maybe here. Same thing with horizon lines. You have a horizon line in your photo. Sometimes there's definitely a time and a place to put your horizon line right across the center of the photo, but there are also a lot of other times you want your horizon on the top third or on the bottom third. So keep the rule of thirds in mind when you are framing up just that last little movement of your camera, and you may want to turn the thirds grid on in your camera. Some cameras have a quarter grid, and others have a 1/3 grid. I use the 1/3 grid if I want a grid. So an example of using the rule of thirds would be this picture of a lavender field. There was this hut and I had this decision to make. Should I put the hut over on the right, on the left? Should it be in the middle? And I went with the rule of thirds and I essentially put it in the top right third of the frame, and it worked out really well. So the next one is framing. And framing is more a tool that I will use when I'm trying to hunt down a good composition. I could be out in the forest and I'm looking, okay, with these trees here, can I frame in a main subject that's in the background between 2 things? Maybe there's 2 cliff walls, 2 trees, there's a gorge, there could even be a cloud shape. But when you've identified a main subject for your photo, finding a frame for it is an awesome tool to use. So again, here's your photo, your viewfinder, and with framing, there could be something that kind of takes up this whole area here and this whole area here, and then right in the middle is the main subject that you actually want your viewers to see. So an example of this would be a photo at Moraine Lake. So I took this photo in the wintertime and I specifically searched for a spot where there would be a tree on the left, that would be the left frame, and a tree on the right, that would be the right frame, and then the main subject, which is the lake and the reflection and the mountains in the background, they would be framed in. The third rule is foregrounds. And this isn't so much a rule as it is just something that you should be looking for. It's in landscape, do you have something as a foreground that's interesting? Now, this is the trouble that a lot of photographers get into. They see a beautiful sunset and they're standing at the beach and maybe there's water. They're standing on top of a hill or on top of a cliff and they go, wow, an amazing sunset. They lift their camera, they take this great photo of the sunset. And then I often get asked, hey, Tim, what do you think of this picture? And I will ask back, well, what is it a picture of? And they'll say, a sunset. And I could say, well, yeah, but it's missing a main subject. It's also missing a foreground. This one is really important. And a lot of times there are interesting foreground elements that you could take a picture of, but you might cut it off. So what I would recommend that you do is when you are framing something up, if you have a main subject, lower that camera down so that there is some kind of a foreground element and it's not too short. Like sometimes you may want it to be at the full 1/3 line so that your foreground element goes up to the bottom 1/3 line. And it becomes part of the overall storytelling of the photo, which I'll get into in an upcoming lesson. So another trick with foregrounds is to put on a wide-angle lens and get your camera lower to the ground. And what happens when you do this, especially when you lean your camera forward just a little bit and you're using a wide-angle lens, is that a small thing that's in the foreground will actually take up a lot of the photo. And then your main subject, let's just say it's a mountain, well, it will become small because you're using a wide-angle lens. So the wider you go with your lens, the bigger your foreground is going to be, and the smaller your background is going to be. So use that as a trick that if you need to expand your foreground, put on a wide-angle lens. So an example photo of an interesting foreground is this one from the mountains, coastal mountains in British Columbia. And you can see that there are some really interesting roots and rocks that I used as an interesting foreground element for the shot. I was standing on top of a cliff and the temptation initially is just get the shot of the whole view, the ocean and the islands in the background and the sunset. But when you include that interesting foreground element, it just makes the overall photo much more interesting and it serves to tell much more of a story. Rule number 4 is a little bit of a favorite for everybody, and it is reflections. So it's amazing actually how often you can find a reflection when you actually seek to look for them. There have been many times where I've been hunting around and not finding anything, and then I'll see there's a little bit of a puddle, and I can use a puddle as a reflection, or especially even in a river where there might be one little pool of the river that's isolated from the moving water and it has calm water on the surface and it can be used as a reflection. Wherever possible, I am looking for reflections because it definitely seeks to tell the story of your photo in a better way. It makes the photo more interesting and it just makes it look wow. So here's an example photo that I shot of Sunburst Mountain in British Columbia. And this photo, it relies on the fact that there is a reflection there. I hung around at this spot for 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon waiting for the wind to calm down because the surface of the lake was rippled so much. In the end, I put on a neutral density filter and I think I was taking either 3 or 4 second exposures on this pano, and it smoothed out and flattened the water and I got some great reflections off of it. And I think that the reflection makes the shot. It's not just a shot of a mountain, it's a reflected mountain and it just makes it look so much more interesting. This next one, I would say, is my favorite. I call this balance and symmetry. Balance and symmetry. And these types of compositions are very difficult to find in a way in landscapes. They're kind of far and few between. And when people discover them, you'll get photographers flocking to that location from all around the world. A case in point is Horseshoe Bend in Page, Arizona. And Horseshoe Bend has been shot millions and millions of times. But why has it been shot so many times? Because it's an awesome composition. And just because something has been shot a million times does not mean that you should not actually go there, make an effort, and go get your own version of that photo. Here's what is so amazing about Horseshoe Bend is that you've got the little island, the peninsula, smack dab right in the middle. You have an equal amount of water going around the island, and then you have an equal amount of cliff sides that are framing in that bottom scene. And it's a perfect example of balance and symmetry. Here's another example. This is a waterfall in Oregon, and we've got the main subject, which is the waterfall going right down the middle of the photo, and then an equal amount of visual weight on the left and on the right. And it works so well for this shot. So let's look at what balance and symmetry does for us. So when we've got our photo frame, balance and symmetry essentially means that you're going to have an equal amount of visual weight on the left side as on the right side. So if you've got that Horseshoe Bend shot, for example, you've got the island and then the river going that way, and then you've got an equal amount of cliff face here, equal amount of cliff face here. And for some reason, this is super pleasing to the human eye. Even if you look at the most beautiful human being in the world, whoever that is, you will notice that their face is entirely perfectly symmetrical from one side to the other. It's just something that we as humans tend to like. And there are so many examples of balance and symmetry shots that work out so well in landscapes. Here's another example, Spirit Island. It's in Alberta. Look at the symmetry on the left compared to the symmetry on the right. And what's really cool about Spirit Island is that if this is sort of the lake line right here, and here's the trees on the top and the reflected trees on the bottom, and then there's this sort of mountain line going up, and the reflected water going down like that, and it creates an X right through the whole photo. And it just makes it, my X is, there's no balance and symmetry there, it's off center, but that X is so unique in the amount of balance and symmetry that's there, and it works out so well. Number 6. This is probably my favorite rule of composition for when I am out in the field and I'm searching for an interesting composition. I will search for, okay, are there any leading lines here? Is there anything I can find that will draw the viewer's eye from the foreground right through the middle of the photo up into the background? So here's an example of this. New York City, the skyline at Manhattan. This is just right by the Brooklyn Bridge. And you've got these pilings out in the water, and they create this beautiful leading line. And I have a saying, there are leading lines, and then there are curved leading lines. And this is a curve. Curved leading lines look even better than just a straight leading line. You'll find so many examples of successful photos that have a road, some sort of a curved road, maybe curved sand dune tops, like this one that I found in Death Valley. But anything that will pull the eye of the viewer from the foreground into the background is going to work. So when you keep these 6 rules of composition in mind when you're out looking for a new composition, you're out looking for something cool to photograph that's going to look good, and you're thinking, all right, I'm going to start with fresh eyes here. I'm going to look for anything that could be a leading line. I'm going to look for something that could have balance and symmetry. I'm going to look for a naturally formed frame. I'm going to look for reflections. And when you have that kind of a mindset, that is how you will be able to find new and unique compositions no matter where you are. So I'll see you in the next lesson, and we are going to talk about stacking the rules of composition.